Thank you, Sandy and Joanne. Wonderful job. I always enjoy your music and always love having you here at this church, serving with music. Did you enjoy that? Amen. Was good, wasn't it? Well, before I preach, before I talk to you about this topic, I want to mention a couple of things. Some of you have been helping out with our needy fund, and some of you have been helping Jackie, and those of you who've seen her today, I just want to say she fell down on her face and ended up in a hospital, and she's here with us. Don't look the same, but no, that's okay. People already saw you. And I just want to thank everybody for helping with some of her needs. I also sent an email yesterday to the whole church about Tony Drexler, and I told you that he was facing a major need in his life. He has not been working for over a year now because of his medical condition. He's on the list for a new heart, but who knows if that's going to happen. So here you have a man, he's basically my age, and he has a 5-year-old that he's taking care of because his ex-wife really doesn't want anything to do with a kid. So he's on the brink of total financial collapse and disaster. And had it not been for our church, he already would have had a disaster. So we already helped him a little bit, and I hope that as you listen to this sermon and as you're living your Christian life, that you will continue to think about some of these folks in our own midst who desperately can use your help. So thank you for that. That leads me into this topic today, and the topic is about Christianity and the role of a Christian in today's society. Last week we talked about the role of the church in the world, and today I want to talk about the role of an individual Christian in the world. And I said that I believe that we should preach the gospel. We should be a church that witnesses and the church that tells people about Jesus. But the only question is, how do you do that? Do you just preach? Do you just knock on the doors? Or do you do more than that? And I am a strong believer and a proponent of Christians actually being involved in the community and doing things that show other people who we are rather than just telling them about who we are. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. When you think about some of these terms, when you think, for example, when somebody says an American, what do you think about? If I say an American and I ask you for a definition, how would you define it? What is an American? Anybody? Somebody that lives here in America. If you ask somebody in Europe for a definition of an American, what would they say? Lucky? Overweight? I heard somebody say, Americans are the people who don't know how to dress. Who don't have any taste in clothes. And it's true. I think it is true. We love to wear blue jeans and t-shirts and just be comfortable and relax. And most people in the world, you go to Europe and you go to Australia and they're all proper, and here in America it's much more relaxed. But if I say an American, you can define that, right? If I say a doctor to you, what is the image that comes into your mind? Somebody on a golf course? While you're waiting for them to come by your room in an emergency, okay? But we can define that. If I say to you a truck driver, you can define that. You see a big burly person, and sometimes it's a lady nowadays, but you can define that. You can see a picture of that. You can easily say, okay, this is a truck driver, this is a doctor, this is a teacher. But what happens when we say a Christian? How do you define the Christian? What would most people say if you ask them to define Christian or Christianity? Someone who believes in Jesus. What else? What do you think some people would say about Christianity?
A God-loving and giving person.
A what?
A God-loving and giving.
A God-loving and giving person? Do you realize that when people were interviewed, 7 out of 10 had a negative opinion of Seventh-day Adventists when they were interviewed about it? And 7 out of 10 had a negative opinion of Christians in general when non-believers were interviewed. So what else do you think some of these people would say about Christianity? As Christians, sometimes we think that we are right and that we are true. In Christianity, you can divide it into brands, right? And you have Catholics, and you have Adventists, and Baptists, and Pentecostals, and Evangelicals, and different kinds of brands. And most of us have grown up in a brand of Christianity, and most Christians believe that their brand is right, and that their brand is true. So Adventists, we claim that our brand is the true brand of Christianity. Why else would we go out there and try to convert a Baptist to be an Adventist? Why else would we go out there and try to convert a Jehovah's Witness to come and be baptized in the Adventist church? Why else would we go out there and invite Catholics to come and join our church if we did not believe that our brand was right? Right? So we deeply believe that our brand is the true brand. Catholics, on the other hand, they believe that their brand is true brand. And Catholic Church and Catholic leadership will tell you that this is the only true church in the whole world. And Pope is the representative of Jesus Christ. And, he almost speaks directly to Jesus, so he is the authority on anything and everything religious and Christian. And Baptists, they will do the same thing. They will say, we are the right brand. And other people, around the world, they look at us. And do you wonder then why sometimes they have a negative opinion of Christians? Because they see all of these Christians fighting amongst each other. They see all of these Christian churches putting the other church down. Right now in America, you have a person who is a Mormon who wants to be a president. And if you listen to the radio, if you listen to the different preachers, just pay attention what they will say about Mormons. It's a sect. I even heard one preacher say, these people are of the devil. And yet Mormons, they also believe that Jesus Christ is the Savior. And by the way, Mormons, they believe that they are the true brand, and they believe that everybody needs to become a Mormon in order to be saved. For some, Christian is defined by what Christians believe. By the way, when you think about Christianity, do you think that Christian is all about what somebody believes or all about how somebody behaves? What are some of the distinct beliefs of the Seventh-day Adventist Church? We believe, for example, what is one of our most important beliefs that we have that's different than any other church? Sabbath. That's why we are here in church today, because we believe that according to the fourth commandment, you should worship on Saturday, the seventh day of the week, right? So we say if you believe in the fourth commandment, then you're a Seventh-day Adventist. So some people define us by what we believe. Other people define us by what we behave. You yourself define yourself either by what you believe or by how you behave. If you ask an average person out there on the street, and I'm just using Adventists as an example, can you tell me something about the Seventh-day Adventists? What do you think they will tell you? Anybody? What's the first thing that they will tell you? Will they say about, what the first thing is? Oh yeah, they don't eat meat. Yeah, I remember them. They don't eat meat. So that's how most people define us, as vegetarians. Although, a majority of Seventh-day Adventists is not a vegetarian. But this is what we are known for.
If I ask you to define a Mormon, what would you say? What would people say? Oh, they believe that you can baptize the dead. Right? Joseph Smith. And you can define a person by what they believe or by how they behave. And that's why there is always these fights, because we say we believe that Jesus Christ is the only way to be saved, right? We believe that. But if you don't, and then we give you a list of the things that how you should behave. We believe that Jesus only saves you, but if you drink alcohol, you're not going to go to heaven. We believe that Jesus Christ is the only one that saves you, but if you watch the wrong kind of movies, you're not going to heaven. So there is a lot of conflict amongst Christians, and there is a lot of fights and arguments and divisions, and as a result, some people simply hate us. Some people simply hate Christians. I was listening to Andy Stanley, and he's one of my favorite preachers that still inspires me. He's not a Seventh-day Adventist. And he was talking about this same topic, and his definition of Christians is this, of how some people see Christians. Judgmental, homophobic moralists who think they are the only ones going to heaven and secretly relish the fact that everyone else is going to hell. Some people see Christians that way. A lot of people out there see Christians that way. I used to knock on the doors and tell people, I'm a pastor from over here, and you know what they would generally tell me? Two things. They would either say, oh, you know what, we already have our own church. Or they would tell me, I don't want nothing to do with Christians. So how do you define Christianity? Many people just don't want anything to do with Christians anymore because of how they see us. Christianity is seen on many levels as judgmental and divisive. And Christians are seen as always standing against something. Have you noticed that? Most Christians always stand against something. They're always fighting against something. And right now, in this moment in the American history, the fight is against gay marriage. So a lot of Christian churches are out there, and this is on their agenda. Huge. We are against gay marriage. And then others, they are against abortion. That's also a popular one, And you have whole churches that are built around these standing against something in the society. So they stand against gay marriage, they stand against abortion. There are churches out there nowadays who are standing against President Obama. They don't want to see him elected, so the whole church is rallying around that whole idea, let's not elect this person, let's elect this other person. We are, in our church, we are against meat eating, right? We are against drinking Coca-Cola. There was a church a few years back that was against SpongeBob. How many of you remember that? Standing against something. We are here to tell the world the truth and to fight against all of these evils and things out there in the world, and we have to warn them. It's interesting to me how Christians don't stand so much against poverty. I don't hear too many preachers preaching against that. I don't hear too many preachers talking about conditions in China, where people are working for $1 a day so that you and I can buy a shirt or a pair of jeans, cheap. You and I, we go into the store and we don't even think about people who make the stuff that we buy. And nobody cares that people out there in those third world countries are basically treated as slaves so that people in America and Europe can have cheap goods to buy. So Christians don't stand against that. You never hear a sermon about it. When was the last time you heard a Christian pastor talk against the war? The war is the single most destructive and evil thing in the world. There is nothing more evil in the world than war. The person who invented war is Satan. There is nothing more disgusting than war. Because people go into the war and they just kill indiscriminately women, children, men, and all of these stories, that we hear on TV, that's all nonsense. In real life, little kids are dying because of the war. And yet we make it sound like it's this fantastic, idyllic fantasy out there. And we have to support it. And we have to stand up and... You kidding me? When was the last time you heard a Christian preacher stand against the war? I haven't. I hear them supporting the war all the time. I heard Christian preacher tell in a sermon that Hugo Chavez should be killed because he's anti-American. I don't hear many people in Christianity talk against present-day slavery. It's happening all over the world. We don't hear them talking about it. We don't hear Christians talk about the environment, stand up for the environment and stand against the destruction of the environment. Do you realize that in your lifetime, it is very possible that you're not going to be able to buy fish and eat it as part of your lunch because we have completely depopulated fisheries all over the world. It's gone. It's not there anymore. Forests, animals, all of that is just being destroyed on a daily basis and consumed by human beings. I don't see Christians standing up against it. I don't see Christians standing up in favor of the women's rights. Even in our own church right now, there is a big fight about whether or not women should be ordained. We believe they should be pastors, and there is many women out there who are pastors, Seventh-day Adventist pastors, but we don't allow them to be ordained. In our own church, that's happening right now. I don't see Christians going out there and standing up against those issues because those issues are not hot-button issues. So we don't even talk about that. So what is a Christian then? What is a Christian then? Can you define it? Do you know that in the Bible, the word Christian is mentioned only 3 times? And do you know that in the Bible, it was always a derogatory term. It was used by others to describe Christians. It was not used by Christians to describe them. It was used by others who wanted to point finger at Christians and say, oh yeah, these are the Christians. It was a bad term. Can you say, for example, today, and I don't want anybody to be offended, but we are talking openly. If you hear somebody say, those Mexicans, how does that sound? How does that sound? If you hear somebody say those Jews, how does that sound? I heard a famous Jewish writer. He says, every time I hear people saying Jews this, Jews that, he says, I start worrying. I mean, and if you take the word by itself, Jew or a Mexican, there is nothing wrong with that word. Right? It describes a people. But if you use it in that term, it becomes a derogatory term. In Chicago, I come from a Yugoslavian background. And in Chicago, there is every single ethnicity. And for every single ethnicity, there is a derogatory term. And for Yugoslavians, it's those Slavs. Slavs. And then they do another take on it. They say Slavs, those Slavs. You know, and for white Americans, what happens if you hear the term those rednecks? Huh? When they said those Christians, that's how that sounded. That's exactly what they meant when they said Christians. It was not a good term. Christians didn't want to use that term to describe themselves. Jesus and his followers, they never used that term. First time it is mentioned in the Bible is when Barnabas goes to check out the church in Antioch. And he left for Tarsus to look for Saul. And when he had found him, he brought him to Antioch. And for an entire year, they met with the church and taught considerable numbers. And the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. Who was called Christians? What were they originally called? They were disciples. Amongst themselves, they called each other disciples. They didn't call themselves Christians. People who wanted to put them down called them Christians. But they called themselves disciples. The next time that they are mentioned in history, it's when the emperor of Rome, Nero, he burned down the Rome. You know that story, right? Everybody says that he was crazy and that he set fire to the city of Rome so that he could stand up on a hill and write music and be inspired and write poetry. So there's a story that he burned Rome. And thousands of people died. Rome was burned to the ground. And then the word got out that it was the Emperor Nero. And in order to deflect the blame from himself, who did he blame? He blamed the Christians. So we have a historian. His name was Tacitus, and this is what he writes. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite torture on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. By the people in the city, they were called Christians. And everybody thought that they were crazy. Everybody thought that they were an abomination to their city. Christians didn't call themselves Christians. It was other people who called them Christians. I got to get a drink. I'm losing my voice. Am I yelling too much? Okay. That should be better. Now, he goes on to say, Christus, from whom the name had its origins, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. And this is written by Cornelius Tacitus. Have you ever heard people say there is no historical evidence that Jesus ever existed? Right there. This is a historical evidence where a historian of the time is talking about Christus, who was put to death by Pontius Pilate. So there is historical evidence that Jesus existed. Where did the word Christian come? Does anybody know? The word Messiah, when it is translated into Greek, is Christ. So that's how we became all Christians. Messiah is Christ. And we are the followers of Christ, so we are Christians. But the early Christians called themselves something different. They called themselves disciples. Do you know what is the difference between a disciple and a Christian? Christian is not defined in the New Testament. The word Christian is not defined in the New Testament. But disciple is clearly defined. A disciple is a learner. an apprentice, a follower, a student. That's what a disciple is. Disciple is somebody who is looking to someone for the answers in life. Disciple is somebody who says, look, I need some advice. And by the way, when you give me the advice, I'm going to follow it. That's who a disciple is. Disciple is somebody who says, I need to know how to live my life. And by the way, when you show me how to live my life, I will follow that. That's what a disciple is. Christian is ambiguous. Anybody can say for themselves, oh, I'm a Christian. And you can have, they say that there is 5 different thousand brands of Christianity today on the planet. And there is probably going to be more. So anybody can say, I'm a Christian, but not everybody can say, I'm a disciple. Acts chapter 6, verse 7, the word of God kept on spreading, and the number of the disciples continued to increase greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests were becoming obedient to the faith. And when he talks about Paul in Acts 9:26, it says, when he came to Jerusalem, he was trying to associate with whom? With the Christians? No, with the disciples. But they were all afraid of him because they thought he was going to kill them. So the early followers of Jesus were called disciples. My question today for you and me is, are you a disciple, a true follower of Jesus? Following means in his steps. Or are you just a Christian? What are you? Let me ask you this. This is a question I really want you to think about. Would Jesus consider you a disciple of his? If Jesus had to judge you right now, how would he classify you? Would he say that you are a disciple of his? If you want to be a disciple of Jesus, there is a way to do that. It's very clearly defined in the Bible. And if the world followed this, I heard Pastor Andy Stanley say, if the world followed this, there wouldn't have been World War I, World War II. There wouldn't have been slavery. There wouldn't have been the civil rights movement. None of that would have been necessary if the world followed the definition of what a disciple is. And the definition is found in John chapter 13, verse 33. John 13:33 says the following. Little children, I'm with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says, the time is coming for us to go our own way. I'm not going to be with you anymore. I'm going to leave you. You're going to be on your own. And then he says in verse 34, and the new command I give you. A new command he gives them. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. That's what a disciple is. Love who? Everybody. For some people, another human being is nothing. They couldn't care less. They couldn't care less. For some people who don't believe in God, they look at a human being and all they see is a unit of molecules. And they couldn't care less. And for other people, they are so steeped into their own prejudices and religion and beliefs that they actually hate another human being because they don't agree with them. How many people hate Muslims? How many Muslims hate Christians? How many people hate, you name it. The world is full of hate. But Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And then he says, by this everyone will know that you are what? My Christians? That you're my disciples. If you love one another. So that's the definition of being a follower of Jesus Christ. Being a Christian is easy. Because anybody can say, I'm a Christian. Christianity today in the world is seen as judgmental and divisive. Judgmental and divisive. We blame the Catholics, Catholics blame the Protestants, Protestants fight amongst each other, everybody is right, and everybody points to another religion and says they're wrong. So Christianity has become divisive and judgmental instead of being what it was intended to be, transformational and unifying. Christianity was supposed to be transformational, meaning that when you talk to somebody about Jesus, their eyes would light up, and you love them, and you care for them, and you do. Maybe you can't solve everybody's problems. I know you can't. I know we can't as a church. How do you solve it? You can't. But do you even care? Do you even care? Maybe you can't give somebody money. Maybe you can walk with them. Maybe you could walk them up to their car and just encourage them. It should be transformational, and it should be unifying. Christians all over the world should be united if they are truly followers of Jesus. Instead of fighting each other, I want to ask you this last question before I close today. What would your week look like? What would your week look like in the next 7 days if you loved other people like Jesus loved you? What would your family look like? What would your neighborhood look like if you just loved the people in that neighborhood the way Jesus loved you? What would your workplace look like if we just loved, nothing else? That's what being a disciple means. So the question is, do you have it in your heart? Do you really have it in your heart to love another person? To show compassion and kindness? And I want to tell you something. This is a spiritual experience. This is not something that necessarily you are or you're not, but this is something that you can become. Because the Holy Spirit of God is the one that transforms us into better people. That's His job. So you know what? Maybe your life is tense. Maybe you got a lot of problems and difficulties and challenges, and maybe your week is going to be crazy. And maybe the way you deal with it is to fight and push people away and yell and scream and even hate at times, and totally forget that you're a disciple of Jesus on some of those occasions. But today, now, you can ask for that power of Jesus to help you be a different person. You can do that. This is not about me giving a lecture. That's not what it's about. This is not about me telling you about Nero and historians. That's not what this is all about. This is about me reminding you and me that we need Jesus. That's what it's about. This is about us connecting to a higher power so that we can be better human beings and that we can do better in this life. That's what this is about. And if you do that today, then your time was not wasted in church.